In this introduction, we want to understand how the process of Estonian internet voting actually works, and we're going to look at some of its prerequisites, so what is actually needed before you even can start thinking about casting a vote online, and what are the kind of basic principles that have been set up institutionally and also technically. So kind of a little perspective from under the hood, how the system of internet voting has been set up. So the basic prerequisites for internet voting, something that you need before you start voting online, is you need a computer that is connected to the internet. After all, when we talk about internet voting throughout this class, we're talking about remote internet voting. So it has to be from remote location of the ballot station. So it's not the kind of voting that you see in some of the countries where the voting machines have been set up into ballot stations. It is really the remote form of internet voting. So for that, the first prerequisite is you need a computer that is connected to the internet. It is not, of course, located in one of the ballot stations, but wherever you are at the moment. Second, you need a digital ID card, or its derivative, mobile ID, which is frequently used in Estonia, basically using the same technical solution. In one case, you can identify yourself with a physical card using a computer and a smart card reader and your 2 PIN codes that are attached to the card. Mobile ID is very similar, except of a card, you're actually using your mobile device through which you can then enter the PIN 1 or the PIN 2. We can also very briefly make a stop about what's all the fuss about the PIN codes that are associated with the digital ID. You may remember that there are 2 codes that are associated with the digital identification. One is PIN 1, which is used for identification only, so that I can tell the computer that me is really me. And then the PIN 2 is associated with digital signatures, and it is used by various apps to confirm the transaction that I'm trying to actually make. Or used for digital signature, digitally signing a particular contract or whatever paper you are interested in. So effectively, you have in Estonian internet voting both of those PIN codes at play. The first one is used for identification, so the system really knows that me is really me. And the PIN 2 is used for digitally signing the vote, so actually for voting. Okay, if the computer is connected to the internet and you are ready to start your voting procedure, it is recommendable that you have an up-to-date antivirus software in your computer and the newest version of digital signature software. And if that all is set up, you can go to the page called valimised.ee and download what's called a voter app. The voting application, basically, you only start it, you don't have to install it or anything, and it gives you the welcome screen where you have 2 options for digital identification. You can use your ID card or you can use a mobile ID. So if you identify yourself using the PIN 1 for only personal identification, you get a welcoming screen that basically tells you, confirms your name, your personal identification code, and welcomes you to vote in these particular elections. Now you can cancel anytime you want during the process, but if you decide to vote, you just simply click hääletama, which means in Estonian to go to vote. Now, using the PIN 1 from the previous screen, the voter app now knows that me behind the computer is really me, What it now does, it goes and checks first whether I'm eligible to vote in the first place. If confirmed, it retrieves the list of candidates for whom I can cast my vote. So they're only those candidates who run in my particular district. So it's not like all of the candidates, but only the ones for whom I can actually vote for. And you select by scrolling through the list. They're represented by parties. And you select the candidate of your choice and confirm your vote. Now in the next screen, you haven't yet cast your vote. You are simply picked up a candidate and said, I want to vote for this candidate. In the next screen, you get a confirmation screen, which asks, is this really the candidate you want to vote for? It presents the candidate number, the name, and the party the party list to which it belongs, or if it's an independent candidate, it says it's independent. And by clicking confirm, you have now cast your vote because the program asks the second PIN code from the user. So in a way, you now have a digitally signed vote. You have confirmed transaction. And if everything works fine, you get this last final screen that confirms, tells you that everything went fine, your vote has been received by the vote counting server, and all is good. You see on the right-hand side of the screen a QR code. We're going to discuss the properties and the goal of this QR code in a minute. It's suffice to say at the moment that it is used for vote verification. So if you have done all of that, you click sulgen, which means in Estonian, you close the application, and the voter application basically closes up. Now what happens, this is the procedure that looks from the user end. What happens under the hood or behind the scenes is that all the votes that are being cast using the voter application are transferred securely in an encrypted format to the vote counting server. After the vote is cast, every voter can verify one's vote, but there is a particular kind of issue to vote verification. You cannot verify your vote from the same device from which you cast your vote, from your computer, in other words. And the idea behind this is that if there was something wrong with casting your vote because of the properties of your computer, say it was infected with a malware, you don't want to verify your vote using the same infected computer. Instead, you would use another device. Normally, the vote verification in Estonian case works so that you use your smartphone, or actually technically you can use any device that can read smart QR codes, but normally people carry smartphones with them. So what they have to do for vote verification is to go to either an App Store or Google Play to download a vote verification application. And this is a simple application that if you open it on a computer and you point it on a screen, on a computer screen, where you had this QR code, it takes a picture of this QR code and displays your vote. And you can then, by looking at the screen, you can tell, okay, this was indeed the candidate for which I voted. So in a way, you can confirm that this was indeed your preference. If that doesn't match, then you can recast your vote. And we will come to these particular properties in a minute. Now, all the votes that are being transferred to the vote counting server can only be opened by the members of the National Electoral Committee. Not all of them, but actually a select a particular set of committee members. And they used, for opening the votes, they use a secret key that is divided into 4 so that all of those key holders have to be present at the time of vote counting. The opening and counting of e-votes is a 2-hour-long process that is open to public, and most notably, of course, the auditors who want to check that everything is done in a proper and transparent fashion. But as I said, it's also public, so anyone who is interested in the procedure can actually register and apply for visiting the vote opening and counting session. It does happen behind closed doors. You cannot take your mobile devices with you or computers. You can audit it, but you cannot communicate the interim results from behind those closed doors. And the reason for this is that the votes come in before the electronic votes are opened, actually before the first votes from the regular ballot stations are coming in at the election night. So they want to separate in a time fashion those two processes. One important point to remember is that the votes are opened and counted only after the personal information is removed from the vote, so that nobody can match the person's ID, the voter, to her actual vote. So these are always removed from one another. And the way in which this is achieved, and this is one of the cornerstones to the entire setup of Estonian internet voting, is that it is the conceptual setup is very similar to that of postal voting. So in postal voting, what you do is you have your ballot card where you can write the number of a candidate to which you can actually cast your vote to. So it's just a ballot with a number. Now this ballot goes into an envelope. That is an empty envelope in terms of private information. It contains, this envelope does not contain any information about me as a voter. There is absolutely no information about that. There is just, in a way, a blank envelope with my vote inside it. And this is called an inner envelope. Now this inner envelope is being put into the outer envelope that contains my personal information, my name, my personal identification code, and it has the address of the electoral committee on it. So you drop it at the post office, and the envelope travels through snail mail to the electoral office. And what happens then there is that they take this envelope and they look at my personal credentials at the outer envelope to check whether I'm eligible to vote and what are the candidates to which I can vote for. Then they open the outer envelope, take out the inner envelope, and they throw out the outer envelope so that it cannot be merged or kind of connected, linked to the inner envelope. So that is being trashed. The inner envelope now contains no information about me as a voter, no identification information. They open it and take out my vote, and they put it in a ballot box for eventual counting. This is how it works in postal voting. In internet voting, it works actually in a very similar fashion. Because remember, you had your PIN code 1 that tells you that you are really you, and then PIN code 2 that is a digital signature. Now, the encrypted vote is actually being put, when you vote, when you cast your vote in a voting application with PIN 2, this PIN 2 is being used to encrypt the vote, but there is no personal information. And it is being put into outer envelope, that the information was gotten from when you entered your first PIN code, that actually told the computer that me is really me, and that is put into an outer envelope. And those envelopes are being sent to the vote counting server because they're encrypted, they're secured, nobody can open them, not at least with nowadays technologies. So they're being sent to the vote counting server. Now, if the vote counting procedure starts in an election day during those 2 hours, what they first do is they separate the outer envelopes where the personal information is contained from the inner ones where the only vote is contained. And they separate them. They trash the outer envelopes so that nobody can ever put together a vote and the voter. And this is how the anonymity, the vote secrecy is being achieved. Now, a few institutional frames that are also relevant to understand the peculiarities of, or the particularities of Estonian internet voting. Internet voting is available in 7-day window during the advance voting period. So it is an advanced voting. It is an advanced voting mechanism, internet voting. And it ends usually on Wednesday, preceding the election day on Sunday. Now, an often debated issue in terms of internet voting is the question of how to ensure vote secrecy in unsupervised environments. In other words, how do we ensure that people, if they vote at home behind their computers, actually vote by themselves so that nobody is buying their votes, nobody is coercing, and so on. So this is something that cannot be checked directly. And that validity must be demonstrated on other grounds. One key institutional kind of solution, and really another cornerstone of Estonian internet voting, is that to ensure that the voter is indeed expressing her true will, internet voters are allowed to cast their e-votes as many times as they want, with only the final e-vote counting and all of the previous ones being cancelled. So imagine if you're approached by somebody who wants to buy your vote, this system, or if you're threatened, this system, the current setup, makes this almost meaningless. There's no point of coercing or buying votes, because at any given time you don't know whether this is going to be the final vote of the e-voter, because they are allowed to go and vote online as many times as they want. From the log files, we have seen that, and we have a special video section on that actually a minority of voters vote more than 2 times or 3 times or 4 times. So really people mostly vote 1 or 2 times. So there is no question about that. But as an institutional safeguard, multiple voting, multiple recasting of e-votes is really at the heart of ensuring that the votes are not being coerced or bought. So this mechanism ensures that the vote buyer or coercer will not know for sure which ballot will eventually be counted, rendering vote buying and coercing virtually meaningless. So following these concerns regarding secrecy and security, Estonian National Electoral Committee has established some basic principles that are both technical, institutional, and kind of normative principles to which the internet voting system in Estonia must adhere to. And this is, I want to go through these principles one by one, as they really constitute the common understanding of how internet voting is being set up in Estonia. So the first one is time framework of internet voting. And this principle states that e-votes may be cast during 7 days from 10th day until the 4th day before the election day. The second principle says that there has to be a possibility to recast an e-vote, so that only the final e-vote is being cast, while all the previous e-votes are being cancelled. Very important principle, the primacy of a ballot paper voting. Now, if the e-voter who has already voted online, maybe even multiple times with his or her last e-vote counting, if this voter now, during the advanced ballots, goes to the polling station and votes on paper, then this on-paper vote will cancel all the previous e-votes, and that paper vote will be counted for counting the election result. So in a way, you have an option to recast several times your e-vote, but if you're not even secure, if you're not even sufficiently kind of reassured that that worked, you can always go during the advance polls to the ballot station, deposit your vote on a paper, which will then cancel all the previous e-votes. Then the fourth one is similarity of e-voting to regular voting. And this principle basically says that e-voting adheres to the Election Acts and general election principles and customs. It is uniform and secret, and only eligible voters may vote and cast their votes. And it should be impossible for voters to know which way somebody else voted. The collection of votes must be secure, reliable, and verifiable. And ultimately, the final principle is that an e-voter shall vote by themselves. Using another person's ID card or mobile ID for voting is prohibited. You cannot, this is stated also in the law, that you cannot lend your card for somebody else. So if all else fails and somebody's casting the vote on your behalf, or steals your vote or whatnot, then it is really your duty as a citizen or a resident of Estonia to comply with the legal framework that states that you cannot give your digital ID out to somebody else so that they can use for whatever purposes they are. So these were the 5 basic principles that have been stated by the National Electoral Committee, and this was the process of internet voting, how it looks from the user's perspective and how it has been set up from the technical and institutional point of view.